Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for watching Riff with Cliff. My name is Cliff and I've got some really cool things to show you today. This is a Gibson Les Paul. This is a Gibson SG. This is a Gibson Les Paul. And you might be asking yourself, but wait a second, Cliff. You just said that that was a Les Paul, and this is a Les Paul, but that's shaped like the SG, so how could that possibly be a Les Paul when it's shaped like the SG and oh no, I've gone cross-eyed? Well, just hang out for a second and I'm going to explain it the best I can why this is a Les Paul as well as the other one that is quite obviously a Les Paul. In 1952, the Les Paul came into production under Gibson. Gibson, of course, being the guitar line, Les Paul being the endorser of the guitar. These guitars started to come into production. They were a gold top finish with two P90 pickups. A lot of people looked at them as some of the most iconic guitars, and I believe that they are right. They are still sold as some of the most iconic guitars and sought-after guitars in the world. If you have a 1958 to a 1960 Gibson Les Paul, an actual vintage one, those are some of the most rare sought-after instruments that are very valuable to collectors out there. So the Les Paul was definitely a huge hit. In 1954, 55, 56, and 57, they kept making the Les Paul. It kept selling. It kept doing really well. They decided to introduce some new colors like sunburst and some new humbucking pickups, which made the guitar sound a little warmer, a little rounder instead of the P90 more bitey sound. Not one is better or worse, it's just a different thing. It is super important to add here, especially before I forget, that while of course Gibson was working on the Les Paul, they had a rival company, Fender, who was working on the Stratocaster and the Telecaster, a guitar that had more curvature and was performing very well in the market, thus starting the epic rivalry that is still going on today between Gibson and Fender, two iconic guitar companies. Well, Gibson took a look at what Fender was doing with their guitars, like the Strat, and they decided it would be a good idea for them to maybe make a different model, something with a little bit more curvature themselves, and that is when the SG was born. Then comes 1961, where they decide to introduce the new shape of the guitar. This guitar is, of course, the Gibson SG, which at the time was called a Les Paul. Well, Mr. Les Paul, whose name was on the actual Les Paul, did not like that at all. But if you take a look at some of these, they're even reissued now to say Les Paul on the top of the headstock. Now, he did not like the shape of the guitar at all. It was not what he was looking for, because he was a guy who really enjoyed the look of the Les Paul and the craftsmanship that went behind it. On a Les Paul, you're talking about a big, thick piece of mahogany wood with a nice, beautiful maple cap. A lot of those old school vintage ones, too, had some beautiful flame right over the top of the guitar, which just made it really, really nice. And a lot of people who enjoyed the craftsmanship of the guitar really liked that Les Paul. So when they went to a thinner piece of mahogany, and as you can see, a Les Paul like this is a very thin piece of mahogany, he did not like that at all. Some of them are actually really thin. Since they were all shaven by hand, you can actually go find some vintage ones that are really, really thin, and nowadays they are made a little thicker. They've always been different since then, because back in the day they used to carve them by hand. By the way, if you did not know, just a fun fact, the SG stands for solid guitar. So Les Paul decided now that, oh, okay, I don't like that, don't want my name on that guitar. So after 1963, Gibson decided to change the name on what is now the SG. Now, of course, there have been many different modifications to the SGs, different pickup selections, different changes, different sounds, but it's just really interesting how this guy came to be known as the Gibson SG, when in fact, at first, it was a Gibson Les Paul. Just kind of some fun information that I thought would be interesting to share with you guys. If you didn't know, I work at a guitar shop called Replay Guitar Exchange. Oh, yeah. And a lot of the times, I get people who ask me these kind of interesting questions, which leads me to want to make these videos, maybe to help you guys. And if you haven't checked out the shop, be sure and do so. So now on to a really loaded, heated question that a lot of people want to ask. What is better, a Gibson SG or a Gibson Les Paul? I'm interested to see what you guys think. Obviously, the shape of the actual guitar is different, so there's a couple different factors that go along with it. On the Gibson SG, you have that double cut, the horn cut, which allows you to play up here a lot easier, a lot quicker, and they're typically a lighter built guitar as they are a thinner piece of wood, and they don't have as much, you know, weight and body to them as the actual Les Paul. That being said, on the other side, a lot of people say that they tend to have some neck dive. So when you're playing it and standing up with a strap, the head will often go down and do a neck dive. I don't really notice it as much, but hey, some people like to say that happens. With a Gibson Les Paul, a lot of people say that they're very heavy instruments. So if you're playing these for a long period of time, you might get some shoulder pain or something like that. They do make guitars nowadays, thankfully, to combat this feature where they actually will chamber the guitars, meaning that they make them lighter. One guitar isn't better or worse. They're both different. They both have different sounds. And there are so many factors that go along with making it sound different or play better or worse. The 57, 58, and 59 Les Paul have a big, fat, chunky neck. And if that's what you're looking for, well then by all means, you should totally go with that neck. But if you like a thinner, smaller neck, then you might want to go for like a 61 SG. In fact, the Les Paul also in 1960, the RO, which they make nowadays, has a small, thinner neck, so that might be more comfortable for you if you don't like to grip a giant neck. All guitars sound slightly different. They all have their own sonic fingerprint, as I like to call it. So I'm not the one to say one's better or worse. I think that they all have their own spot. They all are their own tool. One is like a Phillips head screwdriver. The other is like a flathead screwdriver. They all have their own application. And plus, it's always cool to try to get as many of them as you can because, well, let's be real, they are really, really fun to buy and collect. It's a lot of fun. They also have their own creative purposes, so you might have a guitar that you might want to set up for one tuning and a Les Paul in another tuning, or maybe you just like the way the Les Paul sounds with one song versus an SG sounds with another. My personal opinion on the whole thing, if you had to ask me, is I would take this Les Paul and put it aside any day for my Gibson SG. I have always been a Gibson SG guy, but again, I'm interested to see what you think and what you think of the builds today. I mean, they're still making these guitars today. They are super iconic. Gibson, of course, is one of my favorite guitar companies, and people still buy the heck out of these guitars every single day. So it's just interesting to see how far that they've come along. And I just wanted to give a little bit of insight as to why in 1961 to 1963, they were still called Gibson Les Pauls, even though they are shaped like the Gibson SG. Kind of interesting. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, as it really helps my channel, and it gets that algorithm going, and I'm trying to build it. I'm going to start bringing you more new, cool guitar videos, or pedal videos, or plug-in videos, or whatever I feel like that I come across in the wild. So, yep, thanks for watching this episode of Riff with Cliff. I'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one.